Today, we are dipping into the SpeakPipe viewer voice messages, ladies and gentlemen, on the channel. Remember, we have a SpeakPipe, okay? I want to do this video because I want to hear from you pre-game, after the games, post-game, whatever. If you want to vent, if you want to talk about the Saints or talk about something you saw in the NFL or whatever it is, get on here, SpeakPipe. The link is in every single video description, so it's just a great way for you to drive the channel, drive what we're talking about. So again, I'll be posting links and all that stuff during the season on my Twitter and talk about it during videos. But make sure it's kind of like our way of doing viewer call-ins until I figure out how to actually do a call-in type situation on the phone or whatever. This is the best we've got, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to listen to two today, one from Divine Eternity and one from Dustin. So let's go ahead and listen to Divine Eternity first, and we'll get it going.
So, James, my question is going to sound more like a hot take and controversial.
Ooh, okay. Controversial yet brave hot take. Okay.
Week 1, Carolina Panthers is
Yes.
a scarier must-win matchup than people would like to believe. And I give an
Well, it's definitely a must-win. I mean, there ain't no doubt about that. It is a it is as must-win gets.
example on why. Let's say the Saints lose to the Carolina Panthers in week 1.
Whew, that'd be
And
bad.
then in week 2, we go on the road and beat Dallas. The typical fans are going to look at that and say, we just beat the Dallas Cowboys, and they're a pretty good team, so we're looking pretty good. But in reality, we just lost to an unknown, supposedly bad Carolina team at home in week 1, and we still have to face them on the road.
So that would be a really unique situation, and I think directionally, I think you are right. Like it's worse. It's worse to lose to Carolina than it's good to beat Dallas. I think is what you're trying to or what you're saying. And the idea that if we can't beat Carolina at home, what makes us think we could beat them on the road on top of them being in the division, right? So I understand 100% where you're at right here. There is a devil's advocate to this. The devil's advocate being you could argue that because of the way that they're scheduled, with Carolina going first and then Dallas being second, you could argue that the Carolina one would be viewed as more of a blip, more of a like, well, first game of the year, whatever. And then you would think, like, if they turn around and beat Dallas on the road, then you would assume that whatever the problem was in week 1, they figured out. Because if you're going to lose to Carolina at home in the first week, there's some serious problems, major problems. And if those problems don't exist a week later against a much better opponent on the road, I would argue that shows that they have what it takes to beat Carolina on the road later in the season. If it's flipped, if we beat Dallas to start the season and then lose to Carolina, then you would argue that the Dallas game was a blip and that the Dallas game was like a freak thing. Caught Dallas at a bad time, caught Dallas whatever, and then you show your true colors and losing to Carolina or a letdown spot or whatever. So that's a really unique, a really difficult way to measure, I think, how the team would look, because you'd have it would be such a difference on that spectrum of you lose to arguably the worst team in the NFL at home, but then you beat one of the better teams in the NFC on the road, balancing them out. I do that, like, I don't want to say that those two to me would balance out and not really mean a whole lot, but they really wouldn't. Like, if you told me that's how it played out, I wouldn't draw too much of a conclusion from that. I wouldn't draw too much of a conclusion from us losing to Carolina or us beating Dallas. It was kind of like we'd be in the middle somewhere, and I'd have to see what we would do in the games afterward. Losing a divisional game at home would be a huge issue. Then you have to win divisional games on the road at that point. So, but really, and this is another reason why it kind of equals itself out, is that when the Saints are as tight as they are with the Bucs and the Falcons, you cannot drop games you're supposed to drop because every win counts. Like, this is a 7.5 win team in Vegas. This is a team that won 9 games last year. You have to get to 9 or 10 wins to win the division. You can't waste wins. And that is a win. And yeah, you do balance it with beating Dallas, but then if you're going to beat Dallas, then you should have beat Carolina. So no matter how you look at it, it's a wasted win. Beating Dallas does make it less as far as like how the team is judged, but if you could beat Dallas, then you should have beat Carolina, and if starting 2-0 is a much different narrative, and obviously you should have done that. So every single game that we are favored in, every single time we're playing a team like Washington or Las Vegas or the Broncos or the Panthers or whoever, if we are supposed to beat that team, if we are favored to beat that team, especially if we're at home, we have to beat that team. I'll let you keep going before I go on my continue on my TED Talk.
In Carolina, going down the stretch, to me, that game is more important than the Atlanta game in the first 5 weeks because we face Atlanta in Atlanta, and if we drop that game, we still get Atlanta at home.
I agree with that. If you told me I could choose one of the two, and I could either beat Carolina, if I could either beat Carolina at home and lose to Atlanta, or lose to Carolina at home and beat Atlanta on the road, I would probably choose to. Now I've confused myself. It is definitely. All right, let me back it up. If you told me that I could either, like, which one is worse, we definitely want to beat Carolina at home, and it's not that big of a deal if we lose to Atlanta on the road because, yeah, we play them at home versus Carolina, who we play on the road later on. So, yeah, out of those two, it is a much bigger deal. It is a much bigger deal that if we lost to Carolina at home than if we lose to Atlanta on the road. And so in my example, if I could choose between losing to the two, I'm going to choose to lose to Atlanta. I'm going to absolutely choose we can lose to Atlanta on the road versus losing to Carolina at home. Losing to Carolina at home is like the absolute worst case scenario. It's the absolute worst case scenario of you lose a divisional game, you lose a home game, you start the season off bad, all of a sudden all the hype, all the excitement, all the whatever is gone. Absolutely gone. And there's bench Carr chance, there's fire Allen chance. The Saints schedule is already very difficult at the beginning. So if you drop that Carolina game, you absolutely could be looking at 1-5, 1-6, 0-6, something like that. You drop that game, all of a sudden, your back is against the wall big time, where you're 6-7 weeks in without a win, and you're begging. You got to go on a run to even get to 500. And the conversation of winning the division and all that stuff is completely out the window.
So I think, the typical fan should wake up and start looking at this as not like as just some easy win, but more of a must-win matchup. But what do you think?
Yeah, it's absolutely a must-win. All of our easy games are must-wins. When you are a 500 team, when you are a team that those kind of games are the difference in you being a division champion or a below-average team, when that is the razor's edge, just like last year, like the Bears game, the Giants game, those were easy games. Non-divisional, easy games, backup quarterbacks. Those were must-win games. Those are must-win games because, as we saw, we ended the season in a tiebreaker. So a dropping a game like that, not an option. Not an option at all for us. It's just, and the same goes for the Falcons and the same goes for the Buccaneers. Those three teams are all going to be competing on a very, very thin margin. You cannot have an off game. You cannot drop a game to a team you should beat. You cannot have an off week and say, well, it is what it is. Everyone has off weeks. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So, yeah, Carolina, it's simultaneously an easy game. It's one of our easiest games on the schedule. It might be the easiest game on our schedule. It's definitely up there. But yeah, it's an easy game, but it holds tremendous importance. It holds tremendous importance for the fan base, for the vibe of the season, for the momentum. It's important when it comes to standings, when it comes to tiebreakers, when it comes to the division, when it comes to all that stuff. So yeah, it is the most important game. I mean, I would say this is a bit of a hot take. It's probably the most important game we play in the first like 2 months of the season. It's way more important than Kansas City, Philadelphia, Dallas. It was way more important than those games. It is absolutely imperative that we get off to a hot start against Carolina. Carolina is the security blanket for that stretch. You know, we play Atlanta on the road in that stretch of those first 5-6 games, and it's really important that we have a good game in that one. Because if you told me we get dog walked by the Chiefs, dog walked by the Eagles, dog walked by the Cowboys, but we beat the Falcons and the Panthers, I'd be the happiest guy on earth. I'd be thrilled. I'd be so excited. Losing those 3 does not matter at all. Winning those 2 could be what gives us the lead position in the division for the rest of the season. So yeah, I agree with you. Fans absolutely, and that's what I've been saying. Like in the comment section, when people are like, "We can beat KC," I'm so excited for the Kansas City game, or I'm so excited for Dallas, or whatever. I do agree. Where it's like, look, those are fun games. Those are going to be exciting games for sure. But you need to shift the focus to Carolina and shift the focus to Atlanta. And I mean, really, we could shift the focus every single week. But if I could choose between beating Carolina or beating the Chiefs, I'm picking to choose. I'm beating Carolina, and I think that right there is what you're talking about, where the fans need to kind of wake up or whatever. I think if you asked people, would you rather beat the Chiefs and lose to Carolina or beat Carolina and lose to the Chiefs? I think a lot of people would say they'd rather beat the Chiefs, because then you can say beat Patrick Mahomes, beat him in prime time, beat him on the road, beat the Super Bowl champions, whatever. But that's a very fleeting, short-term kind of deal, where beating Carolina is much more important for us long-term. So, yeah, 100% is a very interesting kind of paradox there. But good question, good thoughts. Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of were right there with it. All right, Dustin.
What's up, dude?
What's up, man?
Quick question.
No problem.
I don't know if you follow his interviews or not, but Drew Brees has stated multiple times that now he has to throw left-handed because he can no longer use his right arm.
Yeah, Brees is mentioned. I think he even says he can't like throw with his kids. He has to throw like underarm or whatever, because he can't. He doesn't have the same with Peyton Manning, where they don't have like the grip strength. That's why Peyton wore the glove at the end of his career. They don't have the something with the nerves in your neck and your shoulder and all that, where you just lose strength in your hand, and yeah, you can't throw a football or grip.
For injury reasons, the Chargers and all that. If Drew Brees wasn't retired for as long as he's been, say he did a Tom Brady and came back, but he came back left-handed, how do you think that would have changed the way we played or our outcome, the season? And do you think it would have been just a one and done? Say we were successful. A left-handed Drew? That's pretty crazy. Appreciate you.
I'll give you this. It is pretty crazy. I mean, that's if Drew Brees retired and then somehow developed his left arm to where he could come back, it would already be insane for a player in their prime to switch from being right-handed to left-handed and play at the same level to be an NFL quarterback. That would already be insane, especially with how little success left-handed quarterbacks have. Left-handed quarterbacks, historically have not been very good. It's harder for whatever reason for left-handed quarterbacks than it is for right-handed quarterbacks. And so that would be one of the greatest medical marvels in sports history if Brees could somehow do that. I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, that would be absolutely insane. That would be one of the that might be the craziest sports thing that ever happened. So let's change it. Okay, let's change it a bit more into the realm of possibility. let's say Brees retires, and when he did, and let's say he takes a year off, and then midway through that second season, so this would be the Andy Dalton season, let's say Brees rehabs his arm or whatever, the time off heals him, and he tries to make a comeback. And let's say he does make a comeback and he says, I want to play. And the Saints say, okay, cool, let's do it. And let's say he comes in that second season and looks decent, certainly better than Andy Dalton. Then what happens? We probably don't go sign Derek Carr. I think if Brees could have played at a average-ish to above average level, even with a couple of years off, I think the Saints would have been more than happy to let him be the quarterback instead of signing Carr, which would have been, so Brees would have played last year under this like super crazy hypothetical. So would it have made a difference? I don't know. I mean, what level is he playing at? I don't know if it would have made that much of a difference with Carmichael and the running game and how bad the offensive line was. That's another part of it too, and it's kind of like with Atlanta. It's kind of like where the idea of like Brees playing, it doesn't fix certain things. It certainly doesn't fix the offensive line. He can kind of mask it with how smart he is and how quickly he can get rid of the ball and all that stuff. But that is a big issue. And, Atlanta is acting like Kirk Cousins can fix their horrible defense, and it can fix the fact that they don't have that great of wide receiver room. And Kirk Cousins, his Achilles is somehow perfectly healed. Like, it would not have masked all that. Brees being around would not have masked our inability to run. I mean, Alvin Kamara averaged 50 yards a game last year. Does Brees make that much better? Probably not. Brees wouldn't mask how bad Pete Carmichael is as an offensive coordinator. So, even if Brees stuck around, I don't think it would have, even if you say Sans retirement, like let's say that Brees doesn't retire. Let's say he just sticks around. I don't think it would have made that much of a difference. I think, we would have won more games. Yeah, I mean, obviously we probably wouldn't have had the 7-win season. Brees is obviously much more impactful and much more whatever than the combination of, Jameis Winston, Trevor Siemian, Taysom Hill, Andy Dalton, whatever. But I think with Peyton leaving, like there was still such a huge hole offensively that Carmichael couldn't figure out. I think Brees would have probably been more of the same. It probably would have been pretty close to what we've seen with Carr and that 9-win area. So as great as Brees is, like at the end there, even if he doesn't retire, even if he's relatively healthy, he certainly wasn't the same player. He wasn't bad, but he couldn't do it on his own then. There's no reason to think he could have done it on his own, as the team got worse or as the team kind of experienced some issues, whether that's injury or whether that's just bad play from certain personnel groups. So a super interesting question. Now, I will say this, and this is something that I think is interesting, is when the 49ers, when Brock Purdy got hurt in the NFC Championship game, and they had to roll out like Christian McCaffrey playing Wildcat quarterback, there was talk that if they would have won that game and went to the Super Bowl, they would have reached out to Phillip Rivers to see if Rivers could have played the Super Bowl. And that's kind of crazy to think about. It's kind of crazy to think about because at that time Rivers had been recently retired, probably still in relative game shape. Can he play one game? And is a one-game Phillip Rivers better than a fourth-string quarterback in the NFL? That is worth a conversation. If, like, let's say last year the Jets, Aaron Rodgers goes down. Let's say the Jets somehow figure it out and get into the wild card. Do you give Tom Brady a call? Tom Brady at that point would have been 1 year off retirement, no doubt still in great shape, no doubt still can play the position. Do you look at bringing him in for a run, for a playoff game, or for whatever in those emergency situations? I think that is kind of worth a bit of a look. I would much rather have Tom Brady last year, 1 year off retirement, than roll Zach Wilson out there, which is crazy to think about. And Brees obviously is not in that conversation. Brees has been retired for a long time now, and he's physically, he's been kind of worn down and whatnot. But In some of those situations, I think, the 49ers, like I said, that's a perfect example of a freak injury. You're already on your third string quarterback. Do you give the Matt Ryans of the world, do you give the Philip Rivers of the world a call, who had been really close to retire? In a sense, it's what Joe Flacco did. Joe Flacco, before he went to Cleveland, he interviewed to be an analyst on CBS or NBC or one of the stations. And he didn't get the job. Because he didn't get the job, he was available for the Browns to sign. He was on his couch. He was basically retired. If he would have got the job being an analyst, he probably doesn't even entertain the Browns' offer. So that's not that different than the situation Tom Brady was in or the situation Philip Rivers was in. So it's interesting, those kind of quarterbacks who we're seeing phase out and retire or pseudo-retire, and exactly what could they bring a team in absolute desperation. So it's interesting to think about, but wild hypothetical. Thank you very much, Dustin. Remember, guys, ladies and gentlemen, speakpipe.com. The link is in the description. It's super easy to leave a message. I check these all the time, and we obviously do these kind of calls. So after the game, before games, we are right up against the NFL season starting. We're going to have a whole lot of games to talk about, whether it's leading up to the Panthers game, whether it's your thoughts after the Panthers game, or the Cowboys game, or the Eagles game, or whatever. This is a great way to bookmark it and have your voice heard, whatever it is. So make sure you are utilizing speakpipe.com. Thank you very much for the voice messages, Divine Eternity and Dustin. I will see all of you in the next video.